Hello, everyone. Welcome to XYZ Podcast. I'm Gary. Today, we are very honored to have Jan and also Amy to talk about a simple architecture and also the practice and their works. I came across this practice because of Design United. It's actually like a collective or student-run project in India. And then Wendy was one of the speakers. And then I'm not sure Jan knows Wendy because Wendy used to work in Foster and Partner as well. And then later on, I found out that Jan's work is very interesting, especially to provide another alternative way of looking, not just architecture or building construction, but also materials. I think that's pretty much very critical. I think a lot of time we just follow the standard, like clay brick or cement brick. We just follow the standard. But Jan's endeavor and also his workshops and projects sort of shows another side of potential to look at architecture in a very refreshing way, especially in Malaysia. I think we ignore that sector pretty much. So allow me to do a little bit of introduction. So Jan studied in Germany and then work in Foster and Partner at London, and then work in Arup in Singapore. And I think that's pretty much very interesting, this kind of geographical travel, and so the borders no longer is a constraint for a designer or architects to work everywhere. And Jan also a founder of Simple Architecture, and later on we would like to talk about a.go.ra Architects as well. That's, I guess, is like a partner that, or it's the same company but different entities. And Jan also guest professor at Base Habitat. It's actually like I had a little look at it, and it's like a studio, I would say, under Uni of Arts, Linz, Austria. And very interesting, there's one little feature I saw is a partnership with UNESCO Earth building. So that's pretty much one of the things that kind of like a key things when we talk about materiality today. So without further ado, hi Jan and Amy. Oh, sorry, Amy. Yeah, Amy is my coursemate, and it's very interesting because I was thinking to find a co-host, and then Amy runs a reading club, called Praise Architecture,
Yeah.
and her first book is actually she chose low tech designed by radical indigenism by Julia Watson, and I thought to invite her to have this kind of conversation. We can talk about it. So, hi Jan, Amy, welcome.
Hi, Gary.
Hi, yeah.
Hi Jan. Okay, hi. Okay, so today, to start it off, I thought to mention a few things, because one is by B.V. Doshi. He was talking about frugality, and I believe some of you might notice Doshi's Aranya low-cost housing. So that's quite interesting when talking about low-cost housing and also the intervention of local materials. And another thing is Alain de Botton's talking about architectural happiness, and there's one particular sentence he was talking about: limitation creates identity. And I think Jan's today is gonna share like the poorer the lower budget you get is actually the more identity driven kind of thing. So Jan, maybe we can start off like, why did you study architecture? Because I read a few interview, you were saying your grandfather is a architect.
Yeah, that's correct, actually. My granddad is an architect. Well, I grew up sort of in an architecture, artistry family. My father himself is an artist. My uncle is an art historian. And so I grew up around art. There was always exhibitions at my father's house. He was not only an artist himself, he was also an exhibition maker, actually, in his own house. So it was always so like a happening space where artists and architects came together, and there was always every 5 to 6 weeks sort of a big event. And and the house where my father was working in was actually built by my granddad, and my granddad's house is also an architecture space full of art. And so I did my first internship actually at my granddad's architecture firm when I was, I don't know, 14, 15, sort of, over summer holidays, to earn a little bit of money. And then I was a little bit in between, becoming an architect at one side, or the other side actually becoming like a doctor, like practitioner. And then I decided to go down the architecture route, basically.
Yeah, but at that point of time, have you ever thought that architects is not just designing buildings? They have to like project management and also run some workshops. That I believe at that point of time, workshop is not really a thing. But then now it's like you're providing another new way of doing architecture.
Well, I think architecture has also changed or developed or moved forward since then. No, I mean, I've obviously observed let's say, I'm born 76. So when I was 14, that was around the time when, the borders between West and Eastern Germany sort of collapsed and we kind of united the country. The architect profession was different at that time, because I could see the firm that my granddad had, where they had maybe 30 architects at the, peak. It was sort of that they were sort of doing everything, in the firm. They were doing the design, they were also doing the building. And nowadays it becomes more specialized. No, it's like there's the specialization on facade technologies. There's a specialization on maybe just the design, like Foster's, for example. Many of the projects that Foster is doing, they're not bringing the project on site. They're just doing the design, and then they're kind of like stepping out, right? And then if the building or the project isn't built like the way they proposed it, they're not even putting their names under the project anymore, so there's much more specialization happening these days. And obviously, when I started studying in 1999, I still assumed that I will become an architect that does everything, right? Architect is this sort of profession where you learn everything a little bit, but nothing like too much, So it's one of these universal professions where, you get a good insight into a lot of things, but you never really specialize on something. That's always how I felt architecture is. And obviously it changed, in the past 20 years, but I tried to sort of go my own way, my own path. And Foster was a interesting experience. I see it sort of as an education, another phase of education, basically, after completing my university. Going into a big sort of, big firm, like machine, if you want to say, with, I think nowadays they have 1,200 architects or something. It's huge. And then from there, moving on to Arab was sort of the option for me to actually go abroad, go to Asia. My partner and I, my wife and I, my partner at that time, my wife now, we had the idea of going abroad, and she studied London School of Economics at SOAS or Birkbeck, did her master there, and then she was also ready to sort of move on and do something else. And this opportunity to go to Singapore was actually, at that time great, because we both wanted to experience something else and develop ourselves further. And and then from there, from Arab, I slowly moved on, or actually not slowly, sort of my contract finished. And I moved on to Thailand, where my partner already started working. So she sort of left me in Singapore for almost 8 months by myself, while I was completing my contract there with Arab. And then I kind of followed her to Thailand, and
So that's how a.go.ra and Simple Architecture started in Thailand.
Sorry. So you have another question?
Sorry. Because I was curious on your childhood in a way, because I was talking to Sebastian in the last episode, and then we were talking about machines and craft. He was talking about Mies, or talking about machines, cars. But I wonder, is it the same thing for you in Germany? Because I thought you studied in Darmstadt, right? Is it called
Darmstadt?
Darmstadt, yeah. So is it something similar, or you focusing on much more subtle way in, like, you're talking about local materials? It's like another side of smart tech or high tech machines.
Well, I must admit that it was a bit of a coincidence how this all started and how this all happened. And I was a little bit like thrown into cold waters. I don't know if that makes sense, but we would say that's that way in Germany. So I was relatively frustrated with the profession as an architect after I finished my my contract with Arup in Singapore, because you realize you arrive there, you are an expat, right? First of all, they sent you from the UK, you're on a very relatively good salary, on an expat salary. You get all these like extras and benefits, and they put you in a sort of service apartment for the first 6 weeks. It's obviously great. It's a great experience. And then it's a major project, the Singapore Sports Hub, probably the biggest dome structure that's been built so far. And but then you realize how, because it was a design build project, and the company I was building is Dragage. They were also the company who's running the stadium for the first 20 years after completion. That was sort of the deal they had with Singapore. And you see that the project in the end was like, they wanted to save money wherever they can, right? So we as architects coming in, and then we proposing, for example, a color scheme. Yeah, like we were working with Kappa Roll, who did the color for the Beijing Olympic Stadium. It's a German company, quite famous for colors, and proposing these sort of color schemes, like seating, red and white, like national colors of Singapore. And then after 3 months working on something like that, it just gets spinned. Yeah, and then you don't even know about it until 2 weeks later, because you're not in those meetings, and then the hierarchy is like, you're just a person who works on things, but in the end, it doesn't really matter if you're there or not. And or at least that was the feeling that I had. And Foster was sort of similar. For Foster, I was not only working in London, I was also working on Mazda Master Plan in Abu Dhabi, which was this idea of building the zero carbon city in the desert, with autonomous driving. They had this personal rapid transport and a sort of concrete plinth, 7-meter high concrete plinth, where all the infrastructure is happening. And then above that, you have sort of this walkable city, with the residential units, a university, and all these sort of things connected to a lightway railway train that is running from Dubai to Abu Dhabi. But in the end, it's the same thing. It never happened. They build a few buildings. How can a 7-meter high concrete plinth be zero carbon? It's a big question, right? That I would nowadays ask myself. It's not possible. It's just, if you want to be honest, it doesn't make much sense. I don't want to use stronger words here in this podcast, but you probably have an idea of like how I feel about it. And so after Singapore, I was, as I said, a bit frustrated about the profession as an architect, and I didn't really knew where everything is going, like where my path is going, where I'm going, what I wanted to do as an architect. And sort of my partner, as I said, she moved to the Thai-Burma border in sort of April, May 2011. And she started working for this community-based organization called Maytao Clinic. Dr. Cynthia Mong founded this hospital in 1989 there on the border. And she kind of fled Burma during the Saffron Revolution, because she's one of these intellectuals, and all the intellectuals in Burma got arrested at that time. And then she founded this hospital, starting very, very small with a group of people on the Thai side, right? So, and for Burmese migrants, Burmese refugees, there are refugee camps along the border. So my partner started working for this organization as a fundraising manager, fund and grants raising manager. And then when I arrived there, because she only had a 1-year contract, I assumed, okay, we're taking like 2 months, 3 months off. I need a break, need to reorientate myself, where my path is leading me in the future. And then I thought we're kind of moving on in March, April. And relatively quickly after I arrived, she kind of told me that she is extending her contract for another 2 years. And then it was for me like, oops, now I'm sort of stranded here in this little border town. but it didn't really last very long, right? So I met Albert Compagnie and then Lena Ramstadt. So they are the two other co-founders of a.go.ra Architects. And yeah, we became friends there on the border. So Albert was already doing a couple of projects for Maytao Clinic. And Lena has her own organization still called Goyo, which is, Karen, that means slowly, slowly. It's a little bit she's based a little bit north of Mesod, of that border town. And yeah, so we kind of got together. Lena is a landscape architect, and Albert studied in Barcelona. So there is this dual thing where you study architecture, but also engineering. And then I studied, as you said, in Darmstadt, Technical University in Darmstadt, which is more sort of design-based, very experimental, very free, very open. So I really enjoyed my studying there. So we got together, and immediately, kind of right away from the beginning, there were projects, right? There was this boarding house project for Maytao Clinic. There was this training center project for Maytao Clinic. And, I looked at my my financial situation and said, okay, I can do this for some time. After a month or two, realizing that life is very cheap there on the border, literally like 400, 500 euros, easy. You can, easy survive. I bought myself a motorbike, like a scooter. And then my partner also kind of, gave me this opportunity, or through the hospital, we got this opportunity to start developing a master plan for a new Maytao Clinic, for a new hospital. So at that time, around 2012, 2013, the border between Thailand and Burma opened up a little bit. So the trade started, and also Mesod, the place there on the border, was sort of announced a special economic zone. Not special economic zone in a way that it's on the other side of the border, but it's sort of like on both sides. So it's a sort of trade zone, because if you look at Bangkok and Yangon, the capital of Burma, it's sort of the border town that all the trade will go through anyways. So there were big investments planned. They were investing in a new airport. They were investing in new highways. They were investing in new border bridges. Checkpoints for trucks and all these things. And because Mesod is actually on this Asian highway that connects, ideally Istanbul with Singapore, the land prices actually went up. And because the old land where the clinic was based, the prices were increased by the landowner, they were thinking about moving the clinic for quite some time. And when this sort of special economic zone was announced, basically the prices went up like year by year. And I think for them, it sort of made more sense to purchase a piece of land a little bit further away from sort of the main infrastructure, highway streets in Mesod. And I think there was a donor from Bangkok that purchased sort of 10 rai. That's the unit in Thailand. Is a rai is about 1,600 square meters. So they purchased around 10 rai, which in this case is about 1.5 hectares, about. And that was the land where we then were able to develop and design the new Maytao Clinic, over the years. So the first year, 2012, I was volunteering. And then from beginning of 2013, they hired Albert and me as sort of, architects, as a sort of team. And we both had half a position, and that paid a month sort of around 500 euros. And that was definitely enough money from which we could live and survive. And then at the end of the year, sort of December, I was flying back for Christmas to see family. And in May, June, I always had to fly back to Germany to get a new 1-year visa. So I had these like 2 times a year where I was flying back to Europe, see my family, see my granddad, and this is how it all started.
Thanks a lot. I think that brings us quite elaborative from starting off from Germany and then ended up in Thailand. I think it's quite a surprising journey in a way. I'm not sure, Amy, do you have any questions? Because I I have this key question is more on the working culture. In a way, you're working in a Western countries and then now brought it back into Asian context. Perhaps it's not really different in a way when you're working in Foster's and then in Arup. I think the scale, in fact, is pretty much the same. It's quite huge. But then would you advise, the young designers to work in a huge corporates? If let's say they wanted to be, working like you on low scale project or non-organizations projects. So you go through these large corporates or big corporates to understand more how to procure, especially a project. So yeah.
Well, I think it's up to everyone basically what he wants to do. I wouldn't say you shouldn't experience this big sort of corporate idea, right? I mean, if you at least are aware of that it is really corporate, right? They're putting all these terms now on their flags and basically saying we are sustainable, no, but they are, in the end, it's just about money. It's hyper commercial, and this is also what frustrated me, right? That it's literally just about the money and not really about design in the end anymore. And so I think to do that, to make that experience yourself, to learn from that experience, I think it can be important for some people, who want to make it, but be careful that you're not getting stuck, because I know a lot of people who basically said the same, I'm just going to work here for 2 years, and after 15 years they are a partner at Foster's, right? But if you are a partner at Foster, you're still relatively nobody, right? You can still get kicked out. You hold 0.2% of Foster or whatever, like revenues, but you're never going to be your own architect. You always have to still respond to somebody else. There is the design board at the top. There's Norman at the top. Then there's a design board. Design board consists of 4 or 5 people. And these are the 2 groups of people who in the end make all the decisions, and even partners or senior partners. And it's not for me, right? I wanted to be my own boss, and I can't imagine myself going back to a big firm like ever again. Obviously it comes with problems, such as you need to make sure that you have enough projects. You need to make sure you also obviously earn some money here and there. I am doing a lot of pro bono projects still in Thailand. Now I'm just doing a school in Uganda, which we are in the process of finding donors for, or finding funding for. And there might be another project coming in Senegal, and but then on the other side, I also need projects, or I need ways to finance myself, right? And that's why a university job in Linz is obviously very helpful. That's one thing. I do another university job in Germany, in Augsburg, which is a smaller university in Munich. And there might even be this semester another one happening at a smaller university in Germany. I'm always up for these, university gigs, I call them, because it's also good to get in touch, have a conversation with students and see and learn from each other. It's not just a one-way thing. I think it's very important that you realize that, and that's also what we probably later talk about in participatory.
Yes.
In the participatory way. It's not just one way. So you need to find ways to finance yourself, and I think I've found a good sort of balance, that I have enough money at the end of the year to do certain things, to do these pro bono projects, but still the commercial projects that I'm doing, I've tried to only do projects with natural resources like Rammed Earth or Adobe projects or straw bale stuff, or everything related to those vernacular techniques are interesting me.
I was going to ask, when you made the move to be with your partner, was it was it a natural progression into doing more vernacular architecture? But it sounds like you already knew you wanted a change in the type of architecture you were working on after you left Foster and Arup.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was sort of, you came from these like big cities, let's say, you can, there's London, there is Abu Dhabi, there is Singapore, and then you suddenly show up in this small little border town with 87,000 inhabitants, right? So that is already a big change, first of all. And I wasn't prepared. No, I wasn't mentally, I wasn't thinking about staying there on the border. I was thinking about, taking a break, and then we move on. And moving on means probably move back to the UK, or to, another place. But I was sure at that time that I didn't want to do jobs as I was doing before at Arup or Foster. I was sure about that. In between Foster and Arup, I was working for a small firm in Clerkenwell in London, AU Studio, on a project in Libya. It also really didn't go through, and it was, if I look back, even it was not a big firm. We only were 15 people, but the projects were similar, right? It was a huge sort of media city in Tripoli, and I was like, what are we doing there? What is this thing? I wasn't really sure about it at all. And looking back, it's like it's not a big difference. So yeah, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So being there and seeing the sort of architecture that was surrounding me, which is obviously a lot of concrete has been used in Thailand, and all the townhouses, they look relatively similar. But then the options that you have to work with, like, earthen architecture, or sort of old traditional techniques, working with wood, working with bamboo, that was actually then starting to really interest me. And we did more and more of those while we were building the hospital. So that went hand in hand. We had this job on one side, building the hospital, providing our monthly income, but then on the other side, doing these sort of projects on the side where we could do, like in this tea house, for example, all the walls are made from soil, made from adobe bricks. They are very thick, they're 50 centimeters. And yeah, it's actually quite interesting that we're starting with this, because there's a quite, you see these like wooden columns that you see standing on the walls. They're sort of a little bit fake, because underneath, like inside the wall, there's a concrete column. So we're hiding the concrete column in the adobe wall, and then on top of the concrete column, because all these trees we found on the side, we found in this tea garden. And then at the end, we were short of a few. So we had to come up with an idea, with a trick. As you see here, we sort of were halving, or actually putting them in like half or third, I don't even know. And then use the concrete column inside the adobe wall, and then on top of the concrete column, we put this wooden column. Now it looks like the wood is standing on the adobe wall, but it's...
Sorry, Jan, I just wanted to add on, because you just now did mention about working in the commercial world. But of course, the good thing is that it's a lucrative, I hope, it's a lucrative salary in the sense to provide a financial support. But on the other side, you did mention this kind of quote unquote meaningless, in a way. You just replicate the same thing in a way. I'm not sure what is that the part of the reflection when you're working in big corporates, because they, as I know, because big corporates, they usually have a template. So they already work in a very efficient way. They have a standard floor plans or things, they have data and stuff to rate it, right? And then it comes to my point, another way is, when we're comparing the way they design is quite interesting. There is this article in The Guardians by Amy, sorry, I can't remember the name.
Peacock?
Amy Fleming. Yeah.
Peacock? No.
No, I think Peacock. So the article was talking about the case for making low-tech dumb cities instead of smart cities. So this is quite interesting, because I see your direction is more on Bernard Rudowski, Julia Watson. They are talking about architecture without architects. And how does that bring that into later on a.go.ra? And I'm quite curious how the dynamic of practice works in this sense. What is a.go.ra and simple architecture works in?
Well, sort of in a.go.ra, it was like a very experimental approach at the very beginning, right? I think all three of us were kind of like not really knowing what this is gonna end up being, right? So we only came up with the name because after the first two projects, the dormitories and the training center that we built, we were invited to an exhibition in Frankfurt in 2013 that was called Build Global, Think Social, at the German Architecture Museum. And that exhibition, I think, was a couple of years before, at the MoMA in New York. We were not part of that. We were only part of the one in Frankfurt, and then it moved on to Vienna. And we were invited to this exhibition, because we posted a few projects on Facebook, or maybe even on Arc Daily. I don't even know how this all happened. At that point, we were like, how are we calling ourselves? Yeah, I have no idea. We didn't really think about it. We were this loose sort of group of architects, Linne, Albert, and myself. And Linne's name is Ramstadt, my name is Glasmeier, and Albert is Olmo. So the G-O-R in the middle of a.go.ra is literally our surname. So a.go.ra. This is how it ended up. a.go.ra, a.go.ra Architects. And then Linne relatively quickly sort of stopped working with us. She wanted to continue working with Goyo, with her own organization. And then Albert and I continued, doing pro bono projects, doing schools mainly. Later on, after we built a few sort of schools, we also had a couple of private houses that we were able to build, which then, if you build them for friends, you can't really do them pro bono, but you don't really do them as a project where you want to, make a lot of money, because we were still like experimenting with shapes and forms, and we had a really cool team of local workers that whenever I'm going back to Thailand, I'm still working with. So literally since 2013, sort of the second or third project that we did, we were working with the same group. And they are all Burmese, but they're all migrants living on the Thai side. Some of them are actually illegal. They don't even have passports. But great people, and it's a great exchange of knowledge and ideas, and detailing. Sometimes they come up with solutions that are so simple and so meaningful in a way that it even blows my mind. Like me studying architecture for 7 years, right? I can learn a lot from these people, and I can learn a lot there on the ground. And realizing that, and it became more and more interesting for me to stay. And after the 2 years of extension that my partner was like extending her contract for this time, we extended. She extended for another year, and then after 4 years for her, the time was sort of done, and she moved to Bangkok. But I kind of stayed most of that time, still in Mae Sot, and started commuting from the border to Bangkok on a regular basis. But yeah, it was good, because we were also, Linne was, I don't know if you know Tyn, T-Y-I-N. Have you heard of these? Tyn architects from Norway. They did a couple of projects north of Mae Sot. They did these butterfly houses. They did a library. They're still posting pictures of that quite frequently, even though the projects are not being used in a way anymore. They were designed, and Linne was one of Tyn, of this group of architects, and she decided to stay while the other two guys decided to go back to Norway. So they sort of also broke up in a way, and then Linne sort of learned Karen. So she learned the local slang and started her own organization.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask back to the idea of, because Yvonne asked a very good question as well. That's also part of the challenge I would like to ask when you're working in a rural area, especially in the area where I'm not sure if you learned a few Burmese or Thai language to talk with them. And also I think because of the location, like you say, Mae Sot or Mae Tao, they are like in the like at the border, right? I'm not sure, is there any political intervention might being part of the factor that affect your design? Like you said earlier, like talking about the land price is actually one thing, because if you wanted to do that, you have to purchase the land or rent it. It's gonna be hike up the construction costs. I'm not sure, Amy, in this case, do you have any question in this talking about challenges?
Not specifically, no.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, Jan. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the land price is a big issue, especially when you realize that investments are coming in, the big companies are coming in. I mean, in 2012, you know, we always counted the numbers of 7-Elevens. You know, 7-Eleven is like this brand of like small little convenience stores. And I think when I arrived in 2012, there was maybe 5 of them, right? And then now when you go to Mesut, you have like 25 of them, right? They're literally everywhere. So you get big supermarkets coming in. As I said, they have a new airport. They have a Tesco now. They have, you know, all these big shops coming in. So, you know, money is coming in. That means land prices go up. For the projects that we are doing, that is obviously very counterproductive, because if you work with schools, especially informal migrant schools that are not actually registered really on the Ministry of Education in Thailand, for example, not like literally illegal schools, then that's an issue, you know, because sometimes they just get kicked off the land. They have to move. This school, for example, here, Kwekabong School, was a school that was based in a resort, and then next to the resort, somebody opened a discotheque, like, you know, with loud music until 4 a.m. in the morning. So they were basically not able to stay at the location anymore. And then we had the opportunity through some Canadian donors, Kasira, with who I'm working with for basically, since 2012. It's a group of volunteers that are coming out, like always around 10 or 12 of them. They're all retired people from Canada, from Quebec, so French-speaking Quebecois. And they then also bring funding, right? So in this case, it was 2 times $7,000, so $14,000. And then over a period of 1.5 years, we were able to build this school. And then, you know, the school could move to this new location. You know, they use these classrooms and they're not staying in an environment where the kids can't sleep at night. And then during the day, obviously, because they're tired, they can't learn. You know, these are all like major issues. This is all like follow-up, you know, stuff that one issue follows the other. And this was for $14,000. We were actually only able to build a very, very low budget school. So I think here we had 10 classrooms, and each classroom in the end is $1,400, and it's almost 60 square meters per classroom. So it's obviously a very small amount per square meter if you think it back.
Sorry, Amy, would you like to add on to something?
Yeah, I think does the temporary aspect, like, because obviously things have to be low cost, but then does that help the temporary nature, and then does the temporary nature help meet the needs if it needs to move?
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, I mean, if we talk about materials now, let's look at materials. When you talk about temporary, concrete is permanent, right? Once it's poured, it's there, right? And once you have to demolish it, you have literally a product that it can be recycled nowadays, but, you know, in situations like you won't recycle it. So it will literally just become a ruin, and you have a concrete floor for the next 100,000 years, whatever, you know, and it's just going to be there. When you talk about adobe, for example, like earthen walls, it is permanent. It has the idea of it is permanent. I mean, there are cities in Iran. They are there for 1,000 years, right? Built from earth. And well, in this case, is also the idea that this school, for example, farmhouse school, the land was rented for 10 years, right? So after 10 years, you don't know what happens, right? If you build from concrete, it will probably still be there, right? It will be more expensive. It is not a very healthy environment. The space will probably be dark in most cases, like the rooms behind. You can't really see them here, but there are other pictures. And if there would be, let's say, a bigger presentation, I would show you the facilities of how the school looked like before and how the classrooms looked like before. But here you just see the final result. So we built this in 5 weeks, right? With a budget of $1,500. And if you later move on or move the school, you just take the wood, you can sell the wood, you can sell the roof material, you throw the walls to the floor, you let it rain on it, and it will be gone, right? So there's no waste material really. The only waste will be the foundation. And here the front slab, that was rest sort of concrete. that in a moment where I wasn't on site, they decided to just pour this there extra because they had the material, which is fine, but and then there are really temporary ones where we from the beginning come up with a solution like classrooms or boarding houses to move them later on, right? Like temporary solutions for the moment. And once we really know what we're going to do with where the children are going to stay, where the school is going to move, where the classroom will be moved, or what the solution will be on the long term, it is no point in building something permanent, right? So come up with a solution that is temporary, that has a concrete slab or even a floor that's been lifted up, and then you move everything.
It's very interesting that Amy brought this up as well. I was thinking to ask, like in a rather technical side, like the soil in this case, are they like a plaster effect or as a plaster? But I believe that they can be made in the brick as well. That's part of the workshop that you did in base habitat. You cast the soil concrete, the soil brick or the clay brick in a way. So you produce by your own. But I wonder, because concrete, they have this very specific binding property. When it comes to like clay, do you have to add on a specific materials or chemical? I won't say chemical, but additional support to reinforce that?
Well, it's literally a fiber, right? This is what a lot of the fibers that you can find in Thailand. We're using rice husk, right? So there are rice factories all around town, not all around town, but there are a few rice factories, and they're selling the rice husk as a material for, I don't know if they use it for fertilizer. I don't even know what they're using it for originally, but I think it's a sort of fertilizer, I assume. We just pour it into, use it here. You see it, there is some rice husk in the mix. We just pour it in, and then you just mix it with the clay, with the soil, add water to it, mix it until it's like not too wet, not too dry, because when it's too wet, then the brick will shrink under sunlight and you become cracks in the brick. But therefore you have the fiber. So the fiber is the sort of binding material that you put into the mix, and then 2-3 days of sunlight and the brick is fine. And it just gets like really, really hard. And the same material we use for for the plaster, first of all, but also for the mortar between the bricks. So it's the same mix. And then for the final layers of the wall, you can have a lime plaster. You can, if you wanted to, you can have cement or add some cement to it, which we were trying not to. We did it a couple of times, but I don't think it ends up really nice. What we often used is a local root. It's from a plant called tapioca. So you sort of boil it, you mix it, you boil it. It's already coming in a powder form. It gets very gooey, and then you have the soil. You sieve it till it becomes very fine. Add some very fine sand to it, and then add this sort of tapioca paste, and then you mix it, and it becomes, you actually have to feel it. You can't even describe
like
it.
Glue,
it becomes
right?
like a mousse. No, it's like a mousse, but so fine and so soft. It's like amazing. And then you can plaster this on the wall, and it becomes very, very smooth until a point where it almost feels like ceramics. It's unbelievable.
I'm very curious. Yeah. Sorry, Amy. Yeah.
Sorry. I was wondering, are these materials and methods things that you learned from local people?
Well, so that's a good question. So this earthen architecture in Thailand is called ban din. So ban is the house and din is the soil. So it's the house made of soil. That's the sort of term or terminology that they're using, ban din. In the north of Thailand, near Chiang Mai, there is a farm called Pan Farm. There is it's run by a guy called John Jandai. He has some very interesting TED Talks on happiness, and you can check him out. He's quite an inspirational guy, and in his farm, all his houses are built from Bandin. So I don't know who it was. I think it was Line. She had some contacts up there. And one of the one of the board members of Maytao Clinic, she lives in Pan Farm. So she lives in one of these clay houses. And we went up there and we learned a little bit about the technique and the idea of this banding. from him. And then we sort of brought it to, Mesot. We brought it to the border and started building it there as well, start using it there. At the beginning, very experimental, very free, and then it became more and more sophisticated. Also, like the design, we have this idea of having the shape not as the feeling of not too much as a hobbit house, right? What you want to do with clay is always everything is round. The house becomes round, right? All like the roof becomes round. We wanted to sort of, the idea was to actually have a contemporary touch to it, have like a relatively clean volume, but then you can shape with windows, you can shape with the roofs, but still relatively, like still having corners in the building rather than, everything like in a very round shape. Because if you see a lot of these vernacular architecture approaches with earth, you see houses, they look like these hobbit houses that you know from the Lord of the Rings movies.
I just wanted to add on, because just now you did mention, I think, sorry, the guy is called John, right? From Thailand.
John
Jandai, yeah. So, and then he's in his TED Talk, I was like,
you watched, so you,
I mean, it's very interesting. He was talking about happiness. And then I was wondering, okay, that sounds very ideal, but then how to live a life, right? I mean, you still need to earn some money. I mean, even though how less you are, you still need to like earn some income. And then I found out that he runs some hotel in a way, like a homestay.
Well, yes. Yeah. And they do all these workshops as well. They're relatively expensive now. So if you want to learn about Bandin in Thailand, you go to him. Yeah. He's offering these workshops and they are quite pricey. He's also offering meditation classes. I think it's now really a sort of organization where you can do various courses also about permaculture courses, and so that's how he's running his business, and that's how he's making money.
Yeah. So
if you have a chance to go up there, you should definitely do it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And this is very close. It's very close to this tea house.
Oh, that's nice.
Just around the corner, basically.
Because I was quite inspired by his sharing session. It's very calm, and there's this kind of Buddhist vibe.
It's very mellow flow in his voice. So, wow.
So I was thinking to ask you, because in two level. So one is you yourself as a designer to communicate with client, because you need to run a so-called bread and butter commission. I would believe that like private commissions, that's where you earn a little money and then to cover back the cost for the vernacular or pro bono works, right? That's one stage where you as a designer with client. Another side is designer with the community. What is the control in the sense, because like we said earlier, perhaps they don't need architects, but what is your role in this case?
Well, you actually said it already yourself. No, do they really need architects? Right. Yeah. This is actually the big question that we all have to ask ourselves, right? Do they need me? Right? What am I here for? What am I doing? Obviously, when you are building a hospital, and in this case, we had Dr. Cynthia, who was the director, the founder of Maytao Clinic, and she's very aware, right, of environmental issues, right? Especially when you see a lot of buildings being built in Thailand. Nobody cares about the environmental impact. So for her, running this sort of community-based organization, she was very aware. And she's also aware of like the use of natural materials, and she's supporting that. That's why we did a lot of the projects for her where we used like adobe and bamboo and temporary structures sometimes. But obviously, when it comes to a hospital, it's a different story, right? Hospital is a bigger, more complex sort of institution, and we did a lot of stuff on designing the floor plans, the facades, the compound, right? The master plan of the clinic, which was we planted very green with sort of covered walkways, and I think it's a beautiful space. It became a beautiful space. So there's definitely a demand for an architect, right? But then if you, for example, build schools, classrooms for migrant learning centers, right? There is a certain way they would build the classrooms themselves. And it's a completely valid option, right? It's a completely valid solution. Who am I to tell them that this is wrong and what I'm proposing is right? No, that's not correct. And I wouldn't do that anymore. And we had a few projects where this project with the corridor that you've seen. It was proposed to us. It was proposed to Maytao Clinic, and then Maytao Clinic at that time didn't have anything in mind. So they basically got back to us and said, "Listen, there's this school. The headmaster is a big supporter of our hospital. Can you design something for him?" We immediately had a feeling at the beginning that there is something not correct with this guy, and that he actually didn't want the school built and designed the way we proposed it, right? So we had a lot of talks, a lot of communications. He spoke a little bit English, mainly Karen. We had someone who was actually translating, but we always, like, till the end, we had the feeling that he is not appreciating really what we're doing. And now, with all the knowledge, I'm still showing the pictures because we built the school in the end. But with all the knowledge in mind, I probably wouldn't build it anymore the way we did, right? If we would not come to an agreement with him, I probably would do something else, right? And this is important that you realize that we are not there to help anyone. They are complete. They can manage themselves, right, in the construction way. Yes, maybe there will be the building would look completely different, and yes, maybe there would be a lot of use of concrete and maybe a very hot tin and metal roof, but there would be a very informal solution, right, for an issue. What we can propose is, yes, we have a material that is a natural material. We have a material that, because it is natural, you can source it right away at your school. You don't have to go to the concrete factory and get the concrete from somewhere. You don't have to pay a nationwide operating company, right, when it comes to concrete. No, we can do it at the location with the community, with the students, with the teachers, with the parents of the students, with the parents of the kids. We can do it as a communal community approach, and this is obviously the perfect idea of what social architecture means, right? You do it there, and you do it with the people, and people learn and reflect also on the material and realize there are other ways of doing things.
Sorry, yeah,
but
Amy,
also exchanging a lot of knowledge, right? So I must say I probably learned more there from the people that surrounded me, from the local people who were working there, than they could have ever learned from me, because they have so much more knowledge than I would ever have. And especially in those climates and with those materials, with those local materials. So
I'm not sure Amy has any reflection on this, because perhaps the thesis was on is on participatory design. And then I was reading out, like, Jonas Fredman, he was talking about architects is not really like totally no rules in this case. They are also part of the people in this sense. So architects are also people. They are working, they are like a leader in a way. They propose things and run the project, but at the same time you also propose this framework to allow people to fill in the gaps. So Amy, what do you think, like, in this case?
Yeah, I was going to ask, with social design and having this communication and like shared knowledge between architect and users, I guess it should happen at all stages, like throughout design and construction. And I wanted to know, is there like a sense of passing on the role of architect once the official architect steps back, and ensuring that once you do step back, that the community and the users are able to maintain the building once you've left?
Well, this is one of the main things that we always want to make sure at the beginning, right? What's the situation? I mean, what's the situation of the organization that we're building something for? Is it a school or an NGO or whatever? No, what are their future plans? And also that impacts the design, right? Like, if, for example, the school plans to move in 5 years, then we either don't build it because a 5-year lifespan of a building is not enough, or we really come up with a temporary solution, right? So this is the sort of thing we try to do. With our workers, it was definitely the experience and definitely the how do I say, what happened actually after a while is that because we had so many other projects, that we were running one project site here, but we didn't have time to really go there every day, that we had like some of our workers made design decisions themselves, right? So these windows that you see at the Quackerbone school with the only thing we said is we want every window to be different, right? We want every window to be this one. We want every room to be a different color, so the kids can identify themselves with the color of the classroom, the red and the green and the blue and the yellow and so on and so on. But also use this bamboo or eucalyptus for the front window. Every room is supposed to be different. And then we came back one day after, I don't know if I had to go to Bangkok and Albert was on holiday or the other way around, and it was amazing. There were the designs that they came up with, the creativity, because they maybe there was a realization on their side that we, it's okay to do it. It's okay, just do it. Just come up with something that you normally wouldn't do, and it's okay, and it's playful and it's interesting, and and this is when we saw that, like Albert and I, and we realized that we became really. I mean, this was probably one of the proudest moments we had when we saw, wow, they are really adapting, and they really they really try to experiment themselves even. But then I have to go one step further. It unfortunately never happened with their own buildings, with the houses that they stayed in. They still were living in this very informal sort of tin, room, which gets really hot and really sticky and relatively dark inside. And but it's interesting. It's interesting to see this development. And there are also obviously always a few things here and there that I still wouldn't understand, but that's how it is. It stays a mystery.
Create like a local sense of ownership as well, if they can see an aspect that they made a decision on.
Exactly. That's also important. That's why we always wanted to invite the teachers of the school to participate. That's why we wanted to have the headmaster on board. We wanted to have the school kids. In 2019, we built this champion school, January, February, about in like 10 weeks or so. We had everybody, after the school was finished at 3:00, everybody came to work, like all the kids, sometimes 5-6 years old. They came to work with us, because the headmaster was great, and he just wanted them to, not as because they must, because it's like, you could get dirty and then you go home and then you have a shower and you can jump in the mud and you get your fingers dirty and you can play with the soil, and it was great. It was probably one of the best projects that I ever did, and this is sort of what we want, right? Like to create a sort of feeling for the building, the feeling that I have participating in building it. There is labor in the building that I've provided, so I'm more careful with it, right? I'm respecting the building more. I create this feeling, as you said, of ownership.
I think that's a very good point as well. And I wanted to ask, because this is a temporary dormitories, right? And it was built like 2011, 2012, if not mistaken. So, and then with a very, very minimal budget. And I think I was quite surprised, because always I think, if architecture is for people, why should we charge so high with extra luxurious materials? Of course, that one is a different taste. If let's say the rich people wanted to get different kind of direction. But in speaking of maintenance wise, like you said, the ownership, that one is more happening in the construction process. But down the road now, this building has been like at least like 8, 9, or 10 years old now. Is there any issue with like the people to run the building? Like, for example, is there any, if there's a leaking, they are able to fix them by themselves?
Yeah, so we built the buildings in 2012. Sort of started in 2012, that's correct. At the beginning, had some money from Luxembourg, from an embassy, and some of the German organization. And I think the Australian government at that time, they still had an organization called AFIDA. I think since the last government, they got rid of it, like Aus-8. It was called Australian 8. It's a little bit like DFID in the UK, you know, a lot of pressure on them by the government. And so yeah, so you have never you have no idea what happened to those buildings, no? You have no idea what happened to these buildings?
No, but I was quite, yeah.
Okay, so in I think there was a time in 2013, 2014 where, so this is the land where we built a new clinic, and the training center, the classrooms are here sort of on the side, and then these are the 5 dormitories that were actually built around these classrooms. And then on the other side, we started building the hospital, and we started in a very, very back corner with a reproductive health department, the medical inpatients, the child inpatient department. Then we built a sort of pharmacy, buffer zone building, we call it, administration, outpatient, patient houses. And then the clinic ran out of space in a way, right? So I think it must have been 2014, 2015. These temporary buildings, then we said, okay, they were temporary, right? So take them down. We already took down one building, the longest one, which was 1 or 2 frames extra, and then we stored it under the other ones. And then there was a fire, and they all were destroyed. So during the dry season, what they do in Thailand is they're burning the crops, the kind of old crops, to kind of fertilize, you know, the soil. And there was a fire like 3 kilometers away that they started on a very windy day. And then the firefighters were sort of chasing that fire, and it sort of stopped on the wall of the compound of Maytar Clinic. And we all were like, okay, that's great. Nothing probably going to happen. And then you see like a couple of sparks flying onto these roofs, and they all went up in flames. There was actually a YouTube video on the Thai news where you see them all going up in flames. And that was obviously, a very bad incident. A couple of students, I think, had minor burns, or nothing major. Nobody died. They lost a lot of their belongings. There was like all the organizations in Mesot got together, and they found solutions for these kids to stay. There were donations from everywhere coming in. I think we did a fundraiser from on Indiegogo, like a fundraising campaign, Indiegogo, for $5,500 or something, to rebuild some of them. And those buildings were gone. So, but the idea is generally, yes, that the local knowledge is there, that people can maintain the building. It's made from bamboo. I mean, these roof sheets, these like leaf sheets or thatch sheets, they can be easily replaced. One of these sheets is like 80 centimeters long. It costs like 4 baht, which is equivalent to like 10p, and you can just replace them. And it happened. I mean, during these 2-3 years, so that we basically say every 1 to 2 years you need to replace the roofs. We obviously didn't replace the whole roofs. We just replaced the sheets where we had holes and gaps. So I think they lasted about 3 years, as I remember. I think the fire was early 2015, as far as I remember. And then we built something different, a little bit more stable, with a sort of shared wooden steel structure, the metal roof, a little bit higher, with more space underneath, to replace them as a more sort of like an open dormitory for visitors of the clinic. That already has been taken down as well and has been moved to another piece of land. So there's a continuous fluctuation of buildings, especially when they're temporary and when the solution or the plan is not yet finalized. Yeah.
I think speaking of the idea of temporary, that comes back to the idea where most of the materials you are using is actually like biodegradable, so they are not creating a very long-lasting environmental impact. That's worth looking at it, because I think that's how you engage with the students in base habitat, to allow the students to make adobe walls or bricks. In an alternative way, while people are talking about stainless steel or plastic, well, there is another way to look at it. I wonder how does it work in workshops, and the flow of it? Like, what do the students learn from this, and is it applicable for in Asia context, or is it okay with working with different kind of climate? Of course, gonna be different kind of properties, but is there like in Austria, it's gonna be different kind of soil or different kind of technology to do that?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, for me, it was the same thing. I mean, usually I'm doing these workshops, as you see in those pictures, for example. That was a college from Bangkok, Harrows International School. Harrows is, the famous Harrows from the UK. There is an international school in Bangkok. I think Harrows in the UK is male dominated, I think, while in Bangkok it's girls and boys. So they basically come there, and then it's literally just everybody learns the technique in 10-15 minutes. That's the amazing thing about working with clay. It's like this, you don't have to be shy. You just get in, get your feet dirty. Some of them wearing boots at the beginning. At the end, nobody's wearing boots anymore. Some of them wearing gloves at the beginning. At the end, nobody's wearing gloves anymore. Everybody, it's about, the haptic material, the experience to work with that material. That I think after this group of students, they were there for 3 days, I think. We made about 200 earthen bricks, which is a very, very low number. With an experienced team, you can make 200, 300 bricks a day, right? But it's fine. They're not used to carrying the mud. It's also heavy. The bricks that we're producing in Thailand are big bricks. No, we're not making small ones. So one of the big bricks in the end is something between 12 to 15 kilos kg, which is heavy. After that, I had a university, architecture students from Assumption University in Bangkok. It's also a private university, and it's the same thing. They were also international students, jumping in the soil. Obviously, at the beginning, very shy, and then after a couple of hours, whatever, I'm dirty already, anyways. No, let's just get more dirty and enjoy the shower tonight. And that's what I'm here for. And yeah, you can put it in your face. It's like sun protection. You can be silly as much as you want to be, and then everybody can build those walls. Yes, they look at the beginning a bit messy. Oops, sorry. They can be very messy at the beginning, but then once the wall is finished, you take a machete and then you just smoothen the sides, and yeah, it's relatively simple on small buildings, on simple buildings like these, right? In Switzerland, we did the project with the students in Switzerland, not in Austria. The university is in Austria, but the project was in Altstetten, which is just across the border in Switzerland. The climate, I wasn't expecting it how different it will be, because we had relatively good temperature in September, October last year. It was relatively warm. We didn't use rice husk, we used straw. So there's an ideal length of straw, which is something between 8 to 12 centimeters for these bricks. Our straw was much longer, so we had to cut it first. We had one of these old 19th century cutting machines, which was very tedious and very exhausting. But then, yeah, it took about at least a week for a brick to dry, probably 10 days. And I think in the end, a lot of the bricks that we used there were still not dry, which is not ideal for the wall. But then the wall wasn't load bearing, which was one thing that was good. We made the wall extra thick. We made it about, I think, 2.5 layers thick. So about 50 centimeters thick, which is good. And the wall wasn't very high either. So I think 2.8 meters. So it was in itself a very monolithic wall that will never collapse. But yeah, if we would have used the wall as like load bearing, the process of drying the bricks is very tedious. And I think that in those climates like Austria, Switzerland, rammed earth probably makes much more sense.
It's very interesting you did mention about the wall thickness, because in Malaysia, like shop houses in Malacca, like old shop houses, during Portuguese period, and they did make like the wall like 300 or 400 mm thick. And it's good because allows the heat to transmit slower So by the time after the middle days goes, and then it will cool down back again.
Yeah.
And then another thing is, when I was looking up to your works, those walls, they are not like 2 stories. They are just 1 story, small projects. And it reminds me, like, especially this project, Malaysia architects Jimmy Lim was talking about architecture without walls. This kind of openness allows for natural ventilation. I think this is the best gift. When I was comparing like tropical country, you can do that, but in Western country you can't do that. It's gonna be too cold.
Obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that's one of the issues that. But then is the question: do we really want to seal a building off, like completely seal a building off? Well, in the private houses we did, right? In the private houses we actually really put a ceiling in some of these, sometimes with bamboo mats or with some other stuff. But if there's air conditioning being used in a building, which I would never propose, especially in buildings with earthen walls, right? You don't need air conditioning because, as you said, the outside temperature radiates to the wall during the day. So in the evening, it's a little bit warmer inside, which is nice because it's cooler outside. And during the day, it's exactly the other way around, right? It's cooler inside and warm outside. So how you want it to be. But in this case, it's, it's a tea house, right? It's a shop, it's a tea room. And you want to see these beautiful hand-pressed tiles. They are also made from earth, right? They're also earthen tiles. And over 200,000 of those. So it's quite a huge number. Obviously, you want to see that, and you don't want to put an extra ceiling in there. That would not have made any sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. I think we have another 10 to 15 minutes.
Oh, wow. That's going fast.
That's very fast. And I hope to talk to you more when I meet you in person. Amy, sorry, do you have any reflection? I mean, before this conversation, we had a little bit chat. Like
I thought there were a couple of questions.
Yes. Let me read it out later on. Sorry. Yeah, Amy.
I'd like to ask, you've mentioned about like sharing knowledge with the people you're designing for, and also sharing knowledge to students and other architects. I guess I wanted to ask how you see the future of sharing knowledge within your own profession, and also how architects can share knowledge to help others like just spread awareness and be better architects.
Yeah, sorry, I think it's a good question, but I wanted to add on a small point because I saw on a.go.ra Architects, they allow open source, like they have PDF and also drawings for the students to download, if not mistaken. Yeah, sorry, Jan. You
could definitely do that. Yeah. So with a.go.ra, I'm not really in touch with Albert anymore. So as sometimes happens, people go different paths, and there might be some issues here and there sometimes. And that's basically what happened. That's why I founded Simple Architecture in early 2017. I haven't even been on the a.go.ra homepage for quite some time, so I don't know. But we always said it's open source. Yes, that's correct. And you can download things. There are other organizations like Building Trust International, for example. I think they are actually based out of Scotland. David and Louise Cole. They started the first project also in this border town in Mesod. I think sharing knowledge is very important, but I'm planning to do the same thing. Unfortunately, I don't have the time. Right? I haven't really done anything on my homepage for probably a year and a half. I have so many things that I wanted to upload and also to share plans, and I'm working on sort of the own sort of visuals of how I'm going to presenting my plans, because I want them to look all the same in a way, all sort of like the same language, and then also talking about the different ways of building with earth and preparing things there. And definitely. I mean, what we're trying to do through Base Habitat is one of these things. Now we're inviting students to do a postgraduate degree, right? Come to Austria. It's an international program. I think this year we had students from India, from Germany, from Switzerland, France, Belgium, Colombia, Peru to join, and then you learn about different techniques So this pavilion within Switzerland we did with Adobe Bricks, but they also learned about rammed earth, they learned about wattle and daub and kop, and we were planning to do actually a project in Thailand with them, which obviously wasn't possible because of the pandemic. There they would have learned also about bamboo, and working with local resources in Thailand. So there are these programs, and more of these programs are coming up. I think Barcelona has one, and in Milan there's something. In the UK there is the alternative for the Centre for Alternative Technologies in Northern Wales, CAT. You might have heard of that. And yeah, I think the architecture needs to be aware of these global issues that we have, right? I think we are looking. I think it's not only, or it's not anymore about building the next luxury resort or the next condominium or the next skyscraper in Dubai, right? We have global issues, right? We had a pandemic, we still have a pandemic, we have refugees, I think the highest numbers of refugees we ever had on this planet. We have migration, and these are the main issues that we need to tackle. And I think architects can do a big contribution to those problems that we have. And I think there's still, the number of architects do that is still too small. We have to become more, we have to become bigger, it has to become a movement. And I do my small part in doing these projects. And I'm currently obviously now based in the UK. I wanted to do a project this year in Thailand, which couldn't happen. Hopefully in January, February, March next year, I will do one. You guys are very welcome to participate and join. Obviously, I would love you to see there. Just doing more projects and using these using these talks and other talks to talk about these problems, right? Because they are global. We have, the profession of an architect is changing, and if you hear a guy from Zaha Hadid, what's his name? Patrick Schumacher saying this is all bullshit architecture, the Alejandro Aravena Biennale in Venice, right? Everything that was exhibited there, he was basically saying this is not architecture, right? This is very frustrating to hear something from a guy who is working for a global company, but it's so ignorant and arrogant, and I don't understand it.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much the worry that the worry that we kind of shared, because that's the reason why I was thinking to invite you, Jan, because to talk about in Malaysia context, we don't talk about this. I mean, especially in tropical countries, we are so blessed with so many materials. I mean, I was once talking with my friend, and no matter in Thailand or Malaysia, whatever you just throw a seed, they will grow well. So the climate is such a bless, and but it's not well educated in a way. In school, we tend to think B.R. Ingalls or Chris Fresh. That's called architecture. But I mean, apart from that, there are another side of it. Maybe I can ask a question from Yvonne, and I think these two worries I also kind of wanted to address. One is more on business model in how to feed the pro bono project, but at the same time you wanted to run the private commercial, not really very commercial, but commissions to help running the financial status of the company. And at the same time, it's about the material use, about the perception, how many people can actually perceive and also understand the use of natural materials.
Well, I think the use of natural materials, like how to perceive it and how to learn about it, is just up to the individual, right? If you want to learn about bamboo, there are so many organizations. Even in Thailand, I can think of 10 organizations who can teach you and train you about how to use bamboo, how to treat bamboo, how to connect bamboo. Are you using screws? Are you using nails? Are you using bolts? Are you, there are so many different ways. Are you just, binding it together? All traditional knots and techniques. And the other thing was about the financial part. Yeah, I'm obviously in a fortunate situation that I have worked in some projects where I was able to make a little bit of money. I'm not very wasteful. I'm not spending a lot of money on things, especially like in the last year. I don't even know what I've spent in the pandemic. I think almost I don't know, just on food, maybe. and then I have this couple of university jobs, and some commissions that I'm very lucky that I can choose from what I'm doing, and from what I'm not doing house extensions in London, because it doesn't interest me. It's I mean, there are just certain projects that I wouldn't even know how to do a building application in the UK. So that's why I'm not, because it's not my cup of tea. I'm just working a little bit on the side, doing the things that I want to do, enjoy myself, and doing stuff like this, like enjoying my Sunday afternoon with you guys, having great conversations, and and talk about the issues that we have, the global issues that we have. And if you have, as I said before, if you have any ideas, maybe we can do a design build project also in Malaysia at some point. I would love to do that. I would love to come.
Thanks a lot, Jan. I think that's we can definitely keep in touch with that. I mean, since you're in Thailand, you will be working in Thailand. It's not very far away from Malaysia, so we can definitely do something with it. And the final question is, I would like to ask: do you see any further step back later in developing your career in a way? Maybe you can design private houses as part of the income, but at the same time, you also get the client who match the taste. The things that you're doing, and also, or perhaps not really on private houses, more on infrastructure, sewerage or drainage. I believe that's also part of the things that you wanted to solve when you're talking about temporary domes or water supply. Yeah.
Well, we did a lot of stuff on sewage and waste. So we built a lot of toilet buildings, toilet blocks in Thailand for the schools, because this is one of the biggest issues there, right? The wash situation. The schools, the champion school we built in 2019 literally was, in Thailand, the roads are always the highest, and then all the lands on the sides are lower. I think it's similar in Malaysia. First of all, you have to lift up the land, to bring it to the street level, so the water is not running into your land. And obviously, when you have like sort of an informal school building, there was a bit like around the toilet, literally the whole rainwater was just standing there 50 centimeter deep, breeding for malaria. Obviously very huge hygienic issues around the toilets. And then they put some old tires in there so you could somehow get to the toilet. So we lifted up the whole land and sorted out the sewage and drainage issues. We built new toilets, took those toilets down, septic tanks. So we're doing that. And then the other question, sorry, I forgot. It was
the other questions. I think pretty much, we were talking about this balance of projects.
Oh yeah, the balance of projects. I'm actually lucky that I am in the process of designing a prototype house in Bangkok with a French partner. He is one of the few, or he's running one of the few companies in Thailand that is actually importing wood to Thailand, which is a.go.ra wood. So it's like wood that you use for interior design. And he is developing, or we are developing together, compressed earthen bricks, like CEBs. And with this compressed earthen bricks, we are, with the help of, with the support of a guy who is probably the most influential rammed earth architect in Thailand. He's not really an architect; he's more like an engineer. He studied in Grenoble, so he does all his buildings from rammed earth in Thailand, also temples and stuff. And so we're designing this prototype house where we on one side use the earthen bricks for structural walls, and then using the rammed earth as sort of a feature for the entrance. And we are in the process of having 2-3 different types of prototypes that we are hoping to introduce to the market at some point later this year or early next year, and to see how the margin will be a little bit higher than a normal concrete house, around 10 to 15%. And I'm in the process also of building a private house using rammed earth in a southern province of Thailand on the beach. So that's a commission it's the same people that did the tea house. And so that's going to be a very exciting project for me, and these are the sort of projects that help me also finance myself.
I'm quite looking forward to see, quote unquote, to capitalize the raw bricks or different kind of ram earth bricks to be introduced into the market, because I think we are so caught up with cement or clay, and then there's nothing else. Sorry, Amy, do you have any thoughts or reflection would you like to share?
I just wanted to say I've really enjoyed this talk. It's been really interesting, getting to know your background with architecture and your philosophy for working as an architect. I've really enjoyed the talk.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Amy and Jan. So maybe, is it okay? Maybe we can open up maybe one or two last questions. I'm sorry that holding you up on the Mother's Day.
No, that's fine. No mind.
Yeah. So anyone would like
I smell the oven already. I smell the roast.
So I wonder anyone would like to, you can turn on your mic and then share your thoughts or throw questions. Or else I can throw one question. Oh, William. Hi, William.
Hello. Really enjoyed the talk. It's very nice of you to share all that. I've got a question on, and maybe this was mentioned before, but I was moving in and out. Your use of timber in base habitat and also the structure in Mesot, it tends to feature this kind of double post or double beams, which I thought was very interesting, because it was something I was looking into as well. But I was wondering, how does that translate in terms of the cost? I assume it's easy to work with when you just put two timbers together, put some spaces in between, and then you can slot something through. And that was the appeal of it. But did you run into any problems using that kind of joint?
Well, you always have like the frame in one direction. So this direction where you have the frames with the two fronts, right? And then you can put, as you said, everything like the beams in between. This direction, the building is always really stiff, right? In the other direction, you obviously have to cross it. And so if you compare these structures, which is actually really interesting comparison, like in Thailand, I think we used 2 inch by 4 inch, right? So 5 centimeter by 10 centimeter. I think in Switzerland, because of snow loads, because of wind, we probably like used 20 by 50, or 20 by 40, completely different dimensions, right? But there's also obviously you need a proper structural engineer in Switzerland. In Thailand, we did that sort of like, did the calculations ourselves, so it fits. But then in Switzerland, we had also the green roof, which is a lot of loads, an extensive green roof, not an intensive green roof. So a lot of substrate on top. And so I think for me, the structure in Switzerland is way too heavy. I would enjoy it to be much slimmer and less wood, but we built it all in a wood workshop. We had all the machines we needed. We had all the support that we needed, but it's not the feel in the pavilion. Like what we did is not sort of what I would want it to build. It's just too much, too massive. For what it is, it's brilliant. It's nice. It's an open pavilion. It's a stage. It has the lookout into this nature garden. It has a natural floor. It has a wooden floor. It has the green roof. Has the adobe wall. But I think the structure for me is still a little bit, or not still a little bit. It is too massive, too big, and I enjoy much more these sort of spontaneous things that you can do in Thailand. I think this frame we designed in like one afternoon, and the relationship, there was no relationship. What happened in Switzerland maybe was a little bit influenced by something we did before, but in the end, it was a student's decision. So it was designed by students. Maybe they've seen something similar before, but yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, William. Anyone? Or actually, I would like to throw one question then, if let's say there's no one. And actually, I would like to ask Amy and Jan. I think the idea of happiness is always been a driven different motivation for us to, to do things. That's because probably like, that's why you feel the frustration, like, oh, why am I working for corporates and I don't feel, searching for the purpose or meaning of life kind of thing. So I wonder, do you have any brief I know this question is so broad, but I'm not sure your definition of happiness or how, or your understanding of happiness. That would be quite interesting. I think, Amy, we were talking about happy city as well, but it's very hard to identify because the idea of happy city is like, because they defined by young girls or, defined by urban strategies, that's only works in a specific place. But when we talk about in Thailand, we don't talk about that kind of, we are talking about happiness in the process, in working with people, right? So maybe, Amy, would you like to talk about it?
Yeah, for me, I think like on a personal level, happiness would be finding the overlap between something that you're good at, something that you're passionate about, and that also contributes to a wider society. So it has a purpose. And I think a lot of architects strive to that. Like, we can see how architecture can improve the environments that we're building for. So yeah, I think finding that overlap between what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and purpose is key. And then also constantly trying to do better, like what you thought something might needed when you began studying architecture might not be like what it is 20 years down the line, or even 5 years down the line. So I think it's important to always be engaged. So like what you think your design purpose is always grounded in reality, I guess.
Well, it's an interesting point what you're mentioning this, because I actually had that in mind, like I think probably an hour ago in, when we talked about stuff. It's always good to reflect on what you're doing in general, right? Like a lot of the projects, I think we talked about these issues with, with the headmaster, that there were certain things that I wouldn't do this way anymore. There are also certain details that you use. There are certain building techniques that are just not working. Yeah? So you make a mistake, and we made thousands of mistakes during our construction. And it's really important that you realize that, and that you learn, that you reflect, you learn from these mistakes. And I think, I don't know, I read it once, like you should actually have a book and write all these mistakes down. And once you fill a whole page of mistakes, you should have a party celebration, because from these mistakes, you learn the most, right?
Yeah.
If everything is always rosy and everybody says all is brilliant, then, you become like very nosy and very, arrogant. But I think it's very important to realize there are a lot of mistakes that you have to make in order to realize and do things better afterwards.
Yeah.
So challenge yourself as much as you can all the time.
Thanks a lot, Jan and Amy. Sorry, one last request. Jan, do you mind to throw a question instead of like advice? I hope that this gonna be quite interesting, because I often get a lot of advice from the professionals or architects or designers, but the advice usually comes from a very personal thing. But how about like, if we throw a question, then at least we can reflect, like you say, we're constantly reflecting on what we need.
Yeah, basically, I would ask the question. So, what do you really want to become as an architect, right? Where do you see yourself, not in the next 2 years, but where do you see yourself in the next 10 years? And what are you really passionate about? That's something also in line with what Amy said. I think it's very important that you enjoy yourself. Sorry, I make a statement again, that you enjoy yourself. And whenever there's a slight feeling of something is wrong, or there's something that I don't like in the work that you're doing as an architect, so, is it in an office? There's always some truth behind the feeling, right? So change, right? Don't wait until you really fed up stuff. Just change the moment you feel like something is not right, because don't waste your time on stuff that you're not enjoying.
Thank you so much. I think that's reflect a lot of young graduates. They might thinking, should I stay in the office and then maybe be the director or partner or whatsoever, and then at the same time you can come out like Jan did, and then come out and doing his own things and find his purpose.
The jobs are there, guys. It's literally it's an open playground for architects. You just have to go somewhere, just pick a spot, go somewhere, learn about local building techniques, local construction techniques, and there probably is within the first month a job for you that you can jump into. It's just or you just sit and wait, but nothing comes out of waiting. So you have to be proactive about things.
Okay, so that's pretty much about it. Thanks a lot, Jan and Amy. It's really
Cool.
enjoy, and I hope to see
Thanks,
you guys
Amy.
soon.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
All
Nice
right,
to meet you,
we
Gary.
can keep in touch. And actually, I dropped maybe I can drop it again, the website, so you can follow up the Simple Architecture Instagram. I actually tagged them on the post.
Instagram is probably the best, because Instagram is where I post the most updates on what I'm doing, and Facebook is sort of, I know it still works pretty well in Southeast Asia, but Europe is sort of Facebook dead.
Maybe you wanted to try to learn some new like Clubhouse or TikTok. but let's see. Okay,
what is the other
keep in
one?
touch.
What is the what
Clubhouse?
TikTok?
Clubhouse. You know Clubhouse? It's like a new app for discussion. It's like a voice channel, but not recorded. Yeah.
Cool. I will check it out.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Have a nice Sunday, guys.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
looking forward to collaborate with you guys
See
again.
you
Okay,
on the
see you then.
3rd. Bye.
Bye.